What's up, gangsters? How about a little test and comparison? One of the subjects that I see come up a lot is masking fluids. And masking fluids are one of those things. I kind of think of them as the edible panties of the scale modeling world, in that they sound like fun, but in reality, yeah, doesn't quite play out the way you think it would. In my experience, masking fluids are exactly like that. I suppose. I've never tried the other thing, so can't say exactly. But at any rate, masking fluids for me have never worked out or lived up to their promise. And I thought I would do a little bit of a demonstration and comparison to show exactly why and in what situations they might actually work. So let's get right to it. Okay, so what I have here is my little test sample, and this is just a piece of some model kit that's got some Tamiya LP11 on it. That is the new Tamiya lacquer, if you're not familiar with it. And it is simply delicious, and it's the silver that I'm going to use on an upcoming project. And what I want to do is I want to look at how some of the reds that I'm considering for the same project will look next to it. This end of it, I don't care about. That's the Tamiya. That's the new Tamiya lacquer black, and it's also pretty sweet. You can see there's a little bit of texture on this. This piece of plastic had a lot of texture on it from the mold. You can kind of see that right there on that aileron, but that doesn't really matter because it's plenty smooth enough for the purposes of masking it. And what I want to do is I've got three reds here. I've got some of this gravity stuff. I've got a couple of MRPs, and so I want three sections, and that works out good because I basically have three sort of masking things that I want to compare. I've got just good old washi tape here, kind of as my control, because it never causes a problem with edges, and that's kind of what this little demo is going to sort of boil down to, is what happens to edges when you use masking. So I'm going to just stick that thing right in the middle of this section right here and do what I would normally do to burnish it down, which is not a whole lot. I don't get crazy with burnishing because you really don't need to. If you're spraying properly, you shouldn't be getting any bleed. And so I usually detack the tape. I forgot to do that piece, but in general I don't get super nutty about burnishing it all down because I just don't get leakage. Now let's talk about the three masking materials. What I have here is the liquid frisket, or whisker biscuit as we've started calling it in Scale Modelers Critique Group, because one day that was how somebody's autocorrect interpreted liquid frisket when they were typing a comment. So I'm going to use some of this. And this is allegedly kind of a latex material. I'm not sure. It's kind of water-based. Not really sure what it is, but it's fairly common. I get this on Amazon, and this stuff is really elastic. And it's very stretchy, and that kind of ends up being its undoing for using it in a lot of liquid masking situations, which you'll see. It is very similar to the Mr. Hobby Mr. Masking Sol Neo, which I have tried. It's very similar, and my bottle of Mr. Masking Sol Neo went bad and turned into a giant blue booger. And that does happen to this stuff over time. It will, as soon as you open the bottle, I guess you're introducing air, it oxidizes, and it will eventually turn into a chunk of latex rubber. And it stinks to high heaven when it does. It smells like a combination of ass, dead feet, and old stinky cheese. It is not good. And I find that these bottles last about 6 months. what I do to sort of hold off on it going bad is I'll transfer some into another container so that I have a bottle that I'm just rarely ever opening, and that seems to help. But yeah, once it goes bad, there's nothing to do except get a new one. Now, the Mr. Masking Salt R is different. Not really sure what it's made of, but it forms more of a film that is, I'm not going to say stiff because it is pliable, but it is not stretchy in the same way that this stuff is. So it's very different, and I've had a lot of guys tell me that they like it better when they want to try and use masking fluid to make an edge, which I'll talk about here in a second. The other thing here I've got is this masking fluid marker pen. High precision, and I'm not sure what kind of masking fluid it has in it, but I'm going to try it out and we're going to see how well it works. Now, the issue that I have with masking fluid is that it has a tendency, when you pull it up, when it's the stretchy kind, to kind of stretch out from under the paint and break away chips of it and leave a jagged line. And I know that's not a very good description, but if you just bear with me, I'll be demonstrating it after these are all dry and I've painted over them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just apply some to this test piece in several segments. And you can see you can use just about anything you want to apply this liquid frisket, but it will ruin a paintbrush, so don't use that. Use a toothpick or something like these little disposable applicators, but you'll see pretty quickly what happens. It as soon as it starts to dry, it turns into a wad that you will not get rid of very quickly. But you can see that it's pretty thin, which is nice because it goes down easily. And the fact that it's so thin helps where you already have an edge. And this is the only time that I'll actually try and use this stuff to define an edge. And that's when there's already an edge molded into the part that creates the paint edge I'm looking for. So what I mean by that is, in other words, let's say that I wanted to mask off one of these rectangular panels. The edge is already molded in. And so what you will find with this masking fluid is that because of surface tension, I suppose, that it will gather up along that edge pretty easily. I mean, obviously, I'd have to be a little more precise to get it into the corners, but you can see what I mean. Right there on that left side, it just naturally gravitates to that edge and makes a pretty good line. And so when you go to pull it off, it naturally creates a break in the paint that helps it come off in a clean edge. But if it's out here in the middle of a contiguous surface like it is right here, what tends to happen is that's where it leaves the crappy edges. And so, like for like trying to use it to create camo, for example, does not work too good because, again, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit, when you go to peel it up, it tends to pull the paint with it. The other thing that makes this stuff a little bit frustrating, you'll see, is that as you are kind of working with it, you'll have some areas that are still wet and some that are still dry. And if you get from one into the other, you'll find that you will start to pull up the original stuff. This stuff is a magnet for itself. And that's also kind of a good way to remove it later, is you can take a brush like this, and I'll demonstrate it, that has a clump of it on the tip of it, and use it kind of like a an eraser almost, and it will help lift the old stuff. So what I'm going to try to do here is in this little section, I'm going to create a wavy line, sort of like you would have with camouflage. And that way I've got a line of masking fluid that is just kind of running across there to help create that pattern. And then I will do the same thing with the others. And you can see also that one of the problems with this stuff is that being water-based, it has a tendency to sort of bead up and not go down just like paint, and so not necessarily hold the shape that you're trying to create with it. But you can see, I mean, if you were doing camouflage, that wouldn't really matter because you wouldn't have to be super precise about it, but you can kind of see what I mean as I'm applying it there. So that's that. Now I am going to do the same thing with the other stuff, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like when it's dry. But the application method is really not going to be any different for any of it. Okay, I never did get back to this yesterday, so where I left off is that these masking fluid samples are applied and dried, and this is a good point to make a couple of points about the application. You can see that I've got the liquid frisket up here, I've got the Mr. Masking Sol R here in the middle, and then the stuff from the pin down here on the bottom. Now, the stuff from the pin is very hard to see, and that was an issue when I was applying it, because honestly, I'm not sure that it's got even coverage. It has a tendency to want to bead up like some of the other stuff does. It comes out of the pin pretty thin and liquid, and you can see that it leaves a very thin coating, and it's tough to even see where it is. You can't tell maybe, but I've got it on this little square here and on this bubble blister thing right there in the upper left-hand corner. So we'll see. Where I would potentially see using that thing for is situations exactly like this, where you want to just carefully apply fluid to just something like that square panel. It seemed to work pretty good for that, but we'll see when I actually peel it off how well it covered. Now, the next thing is, one thing that people would like to be able to do with masking fluid is trim it to shape. And I want to show this because I've tried this on a couple of occasions, and they behave quite differently between these two sort of types of fluid that I have. I'm not going to try trimming the stuff from the pin because there's just no point. It's too hard to see, and it's too thin. So what I've got here is a scalpel blade. I can't vouch for how sharp it is, but I'm going to just trim both the, hopefully I can do this and stay on camera, we'll see. I'm going to trim both the green stuff and the liquid frisket, and I'm just going to do a straight cut here. The tough thing is to not cut so deeply that you're actually cutting into the surface of the plastic. I mean, that's obviously a bad thing. So let's see if I cut deep enough. Even that scalpel blade is probably pretty dull. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm screwed because I apparently did not cut through the stuff. So let me try a different blade. Or maybe it's just in that one part of the cut. I don't know. Let me see here. Okay, there's no doubt that cut through. So you can see this blade is pretty much not sharp, and it's kind of dragging a little bit, and it shifted the masking fluid where I want to keep it. But you can see, I'm sorry, I keep banging in the camera. This is why I don't do much on-camera crap, because I suck at it. Anyway, you can see that the cut is not complete, and it wants to lift. See, it's lifting it on the other parts of the cut. I mean, on the other side of the cut. And that obviously means that your masking job is basically ruined. And at least there in the upper portion of it, I did scratch through to the paint underneath. So trimming it is just not going to be easy. Now, it would be easier if I were doing it down here in a groove, I suppose. So I think what I will do is I will try a blade that I know is sharp. I've got one right here. This is a little bitty scalpel blade, and I know this one's quite sharp. So let me try again. Okay, so no doubt that cut through the masking fluid. I'm afraid it also cut into the paint. So let me see what happens now. Yep. See, I got a pretty clean cut, but even so, it's still, when I peeled off the section that I cut, that I wanted to remove, it still lifted a little bit in this corner right down here. So you can kind of see it's a little loose right there. Not too bad, not as bad as it was before. So I'm just going to leave that and paint, and then we'll see what happens. Now let me try cutting the liquid frisket with the same blade, and let's see what happens. And I already can tell you that this is not going to go well. The liquid frisket stuff is just so rubbery that even a really sharp blade, in my experience, does not do well. So make the same type of cut. Well, maybe. We'll see. It seemed like it cut better than I expected it to. Let's see what happens when I peel that off. It's tough to get tweezers on this stuff because it is a thin film. And this, maybe I should just use my trick that I was talking about before with the applicator that's got dried frisket on it, and you can see it really grips on itself, and it pulls it up pretty easily. So that did pretty good, actually. I'm surprised. That cut relatively well, but it's a pretty thin film, and I'm pretty sure that I cut clear through into the paint. You can kind of see there where I trimmed that off. I'm going to go over here and trim this little panel out, because that's the kind of situation where you would be most likely to do this sort of an operation. Like, for example, a canopy frame. I mean, I can't think of a situation where you would be doing this just on an open section like I was there. Now, this is not cutting as well, and I'll show you before I peel it off what I mean. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to see this. Okay, look at the material on both sides of the cut. Come on, focus up there, silly camera. See, it's disturbed on both sides of the cut. And that's going to show up when I peel it off after I paint it. No doubt about that. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to peel that off of there. And then I am going to get straight to the paint. And we'll see. After the paint is dry, I'll come back and peel that up, and we'll see how that looks. But you can really see this is what I'm talking about. If you look there where I trimmed that panel section out, you can see that on the outside of the cut, where the masking fluid remains, that it is kind of jiggered up there. I don't know a better way to put it, but it's not going to leave me the nice straight line that I want. And that's about as straightforward a trimming situation as you're going to find, where you've got the panel line to follow. I mean, that's a super deep panel line. And so I know that it's not that I did a lousy job of cutting. It's just that that's the nature of the material. So anyway, we'll come back later and take a look after I paint it. Okay, so I painted these just a little while ago, and it's time to peel off this masking stuff. You can see my 3 different shades of red, and the first thing I'm going to peel off is the masking tape, because I consider that to be kind of the control. I mean, you just should never have trouble with good masking tape, assuming you peel it properly, and I will once again say that the way to do that is always parallel to the surface and away from the paint line. Now in this case there are 2 paint lines because there's one on each side of the tape, but what I mean by away from the paint line is, let's assume that this was the edge you were trying to care about. You would peel at like a 45-degree angle away from that and parallel to the surface. But since there are 2, then you just don't have any choice but to split the difference and go straight back between them. So, as expected, 0 issues with those edges. No leaking, no chipping, no nothing. Okay, that's how it's supposed to be. Now, let's get rid of the other masking materials. But before I do that, you can really see now that there's paint here what I meant when I was talking about the quality of the edges right there. Just not good. Not going to be good enough for sure. So let's get started with removing that. Now, for this part right here, I'm going to just remove it as any old way I can get it off of there. And then for the other part, I will try and do it more carefully. But again, just demonstrating how you can use this trick of this latex stuff being a magnet for itself to get it off. And this is really useful when you're using this latex masking fluid for things like chipping. And that is an application where it really is perfect. And the fact that it does not necessarily produce the best edges is not such a problem. Okay, so now you can see that edge where I cut it is pretty good. Looks pretty good. Doesn't look like I got into the base coat nearly as bad as I thought it did. But now, okay, watch. If you can see this, okay, hopefully the camera will focus. See where I'm peeling this off. Let's watch how that edge behaves. Okay, and you can see exactly what I mean. This may be kind of subtle, but let me get something to point to it with, and I think you'll see what I'm saying. So look right here where the tip of the knife blade is. All right, see see how jagged all of that is? Some of that is just the shape that the fluid left. But right here, you've got a fleck of paint, and I don't think it shows up really on camera, but I'll try. See that's loose right there? Hopefully you can see that. And it's not going to break off in a way that creates a clean edge like I would have wanted. So that's the number one issue with using this latex style masking fluid in a situation like that, and why I always say that it is not an appropriate material for creating an edge, and sometimes not even if the part itself helps you create the edge. Because you can see where I tried to cut it using the panel lines, it didn't go so well. Now, down here, where I used the edge to just let the fluid flow up against it, it's a little bit better, but still not great. I mean, you may or may not get away with it. What I find it depends on is kind of the difference in height. Like if this panel right here stuck up higher than the surrounding surface, then the masking fluid would have worked pretty well to define that edge, and it would have peeled away probably pretty successfully. But when it's flush like that, all bets are off. So let me get rid of this, and you can see immediately what is going on here. See how the paint is not stretchy, but the masking fluid is, and so you have a conflict there, and that's kind of the reason why with masking tape you don't get that effect, because neither the tape or the paint is trying to stretch. And it's not really a problem with stretchy tape like for example vinyl tape, vinyl pinstriping tape, because even though it's quote stretchy, it's not as stretchy as this crazy fluid is. So at any rate, point being is you can very clearly see the issue, okay? I painted that masking fluid on there with a fairly smooth demarcation between the colors, and it didn't maintain any of that. I mean, it just totally destroyed that edge. So I don't think a whole lot more needs to be said about that. That's a pretty clear example of the issue. Okay, now let me move over here to this portion where I've used the masking Sol R, and let's see how it does. I predict better, but we'll see. It's tougher to get loose because it makes you can see it makes more of a really thin film, and so it's just tougher to get your tweezers on. But look, I mean, it peeled off of there, and there's the fluid that I peeled off, and there's the edge that it left. I think it's a pretty exact match. I didn't see that it was doing any of that chipping that the other stuff did. We'll try on the other section here and see. So that's good. That's promising. I had been told by some guys that I trust that you could use this stuff for doing that type of work, where you maybe wanted to use it for creating really, really crisp but free-form camouflage. And that looks like it might be right. So that's good. That's good. See that? Perfect. No issues with those edges whatsoever. So I would call the Masking Sol R a resounding success if that's what you want to do with it. Now, the next part is going to be a little tougher because you still cannot see where the where that masking fluid from the masking fluid pin is. I mean, I kind of know, but still hard to see. So I'm going to try this method first because that's the least destructive. And that's just not doing me any good at all. So now what? Maybe a toothpick. Let's see. A toothpick is sometimes good because it gives you a sharp point that is not going to gouge what's underneath it. At least with lacquers, you might get away with it. So yeah, that's coming off. But man, if I have to sit here and remove this, all of this like that, we're gonna have a problem because I'm gonna be cranky. And I think that already, I mean, I can't necessarily tell where I'm just scratching off the masking fluid and where I'm maybe scratching the red paint. So I don't know. That's not good. It's not wonderful at all. Let's try it over here on this little panel line section that I was doing. That's working better because, again, there's the part creates the edge, and so that went better. Maybe still kind of stuck on there. It's like a booger you can't get off of your finger. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, now I'm trying it on this little section of this where the little bubble, molded in bubble looking thing is, and that's sort of working. And the little bubble thing is the type of situation where you would really want masking fluid to work, all right? Because it's tiny, it's an irregular shape that masking tape is not going to stick to, and at least in this case, again, the edge defines the separation. The part creates the edge, but it didn't really go that well. You can see right there on that little square panel, not so bad. By the time you do some panel line washing and so forth, and especially if there's any chipping going on, you'll probably be okay. But with this little molded in bubble gizmo, yeah, not so good. So now I'm just going to get after it with my fingernail because it has to come off, and I really don't have anything to lose, right? It's not like it's the real thing. And my fingernail is removing it pretty well. But again, I kind of know where to attack it because I know where I put it. But it's pretty imprecise. And I mean, I wouldn't want to do that on real paint. So yeah, I think I'm probably done with this masking fluid pen. I think it's one of those things that's going to go in the bottom of a drawer, and that I'll file it away in the back of my mind that I have it, and it will maybe come out for a very specific circumstance where I think it might actually be easiest to apply, and I don't have to worry too much about how difficult it is to remove. But more likely, I'll be going through that drawer a year from now and see something that looks like it will never get used, and I will end up throwing it away because, yeah, that's not a result I can count on for any useful purpose. Okay, so there you go. Hopefully that elucidates a little bit of why I generally do not use masking fluids for anything other than infill. And what I mean by infill is you do all the real edges with tape or blue tack or white tack or whatever it is you want to use. And then to save time, you just get a big applicator and start spooging masking fluid in between so that you don't end up using half a roll of tape to cover all that stuff up. I use the liquid frisket for that type of thing quite a bit because it's easy to apply and it comes off super easy. Now, as you can see from the demonstration, the Mr. Masking Sol R type masking fluid, which, if I understand correctly, is pretty similar to like the micro scale masking fluid, and there may be other varieties of it out there, but that, makes me think that it might have actual application for some things like doing camouflage work where you want a super, super crisp line. At any rate, it does give me hope that it has more promise of actually working like you would hope it would than the other stuff has. So, at any rate, I just thought this might be helpful because it's a subject that comes up a lot and it's kind of difficult to explain in a little Facebook comment what my reasons are for not caring much for the stuff. So, at any rate, as always, I hope you guys found this useful, and I definitely appreciate you watching. Much love.